Hello, I'm Brett Moss, and you're watching The Defining Moment for Creating the Culture of Conscience. Our guest today is Archbishop George Augustus Stallings, Jr. He's back for his second interview with The Defining Moment. As a priest, Archbishop Stallings left the Roman Catholic Church in 1989 to found the Imani Temple African-American Catholic congregation, which is headquartered in Washington, D.C. He serves as national co-president of the American Clergy Leadership Conference, an interreligious and interracial coalition of clergy here in the United States. He's also a publisher, as well as an author of several books, including his upcoming autobiography, Confessions of a Renegade Priest. He's made numerous television appearances, including The Oprah Winfrey Show and Larry King Live. Archbishop Stallings is the oldest of 6 children. He's married to Sayumi Kamimoto, and together they have 2 sons. Archbishop Stallings, it's my pleasure once again to welcome you back to Defining Moment. Thank you so much for being our guest today.
My pleasure, Brett, and it's great being a selected and special guest on The Defining Moment.
It's our pleasure. It's our honor. Thank you so much. In our first interview, you shared with our viewers about having participated yourself in a special wedding ceremony, a VIP wedding ceremony, which was officiated by the Reverend Myung of Korea. And you were there together with a Roman Catholic archbishop who became world famous because he participated in that wedding ceremony, Emmanuel Malingo, Archbishop Emmanuel Malingo. This happened 5 years ago in 2001. Both you and Archbishop Malingo accepted that Reverend Moon and his wife would handpick a wife for you. And you accepted that and got married. And then a great drama, a great saga unfolded after, especially for Archbishop Malingo, after that ceremony. Tell us what happened. Briefly recount for us what happened in something that dominated the television news in Rome for several weeks back in 2001 when Pope John Paul II intervened and pleaded that Archbishop Malingo would abandon his wife and return to his vows of celibacy. Please tell us what happened.
In May of 2001, 60 representatives of the world's religions gathered in New York City for the blessing of marriage. These were all outstanding ministers and pastors from the various faith traditions, especially Christianity. Among those 60 couples were Archbishop Emmanuel Malingo and his soon-to-be wife Maria Sung and my soon-to-be wife Sayumi Kamimoto. And we were there as a result of the 50-state speaking tour that the Reverend Dr. Sam Myung Moon had completed
in the United States.
So this wedding ceremony was to be a celebration of the coming together of outstanding clergy from around the world, especially in the United States, to lift up this ideal of becoming one universal family, and that we could transcend religion as the means of bringing us together.
Not to mention race.
And race, because we had the races, the different races, the religions, the cultures. But it was quite an historic event because one of the persons was still actively involved with the Roman Catholic Church in a high position of archbishop, namely Archbishop Emmanuel Malingo, the former Archbishop of Lusaka in Zambia, as well as a director of a special office in the Vatican for immigrants and migrant workers. Known also internationally, he had already received international acclaim as a healer and exorcist.
Very spiritual man.
Very spiritual man, declaring that in 1974, some 5 years after he was appointed Archbishop of Lusaka by Pope Paul VI, and ordained a bishop, an archbishop, by Pope Paul VI in 1969 at the age of 39.
Very young.
He went from priest to archbishop.
Incredible.
Incredible. That he was coming to the United States to be married this was unprecedented.
Yes.
And so,
and not just to be married, but to be married by Reverend Myung,
of course, I mean,
the founder of the Unification Church.
That just created, not only sparks, but an atomic bomb explosion. The whole city erupted, and then thus sent out tidal waves even to the Vatican with this news. Considered horrific.
And you were there. You were there. You were at the heart of it.
I was sitting right next to him. Having been a Roman Catholic priest for 15 years, and now the founder and Archbishop of an autonomous, independent, and African-centered Catholic expression of the faith known as the African American Catholic Congregation and its Imani temples. We were close brothers. But what happened after the wedding is that we had a press conference, and the message of that press conference went worldwide, and that is when the Vatican first became aware that one of its archbishops, one of its outstanding, although controversial archbishops, had actually been married by the Reverend Sun Myung Moon. This was drama at its zenith.
Yeah.
So during the summer of 2001. The Archbishop went about America proclaiming the age of a married priesthood, that he had no desire to leave the Roman Catholic Church, had the greatest love and respect for the Catholic Church, and a very personal, deep respect for Pope John Paul II.
Yes.
And his desire was to go to Rome, to return to Rome after 3 months of marriage. We got married on May the 27th, 2001. The beginning of August, he's going to Rome to meet the Pope at his summer residence at Castel Gandolfo, where it's much cooler in the hillside when things are cool during the summertime, to appeal to the Pope to allow him the option of remaining married and seeing this as a viable option.
Now,
well,
in a sense, sorry to interrupt you, but in a sense, he wanted to reform something that has become a central part of the Catholic Church.
Right, he wanted to reform the Roman Catholic Church without the express permission of the Roman Catholic Church to get married in the first place. Yeah. He figured, I'll marry and then I'll
worry about
the details later, right? So when he went back and the reason why a lot of people do not know the real reason as to why Archbishop Emmanuel Malingo returned to Rome in the summer of 2001. It was because he had received notification through some personal contacts in Rome that the Pope was near death, and that the news of Archbishop Malingo's marriage that seemed to have created an international scandal for the Roman Catholic Church was hastening the Pope's last days, or moving him closer to death. And because Archbishop Malingo and the Pope were so close, Archbishop returned to Rome
out of a concern to show respect.
And that's when we heard that famous utterance of Pope John Paul II, for the sake of Christ, return to the Catholic Church. And that's what he did. The Vatican said that he renounced his marriage, but the Archbishop will tell you he never renounced his marriage. He always considered himself to be eternally married to his wife, Maria Sung, once that blessing was performed by two parents, and that he was disciplined for a year by having been sent to Argentina, and then for the 4 years after that point, until the time of his departure, he was in a prison, literally in a prison, being guarded all the time, having no freedom to move about.
You said literally in a prison. You mean in a prison-like situation?
Yeah, in a prison-like situation. I don't want anyone to think that he was a Saddam Hussein up in a prison, awaiting trial. No, but he was the atmosphere. He was in that ambiance, that psychological prison where he was not able to move around. He couldn't move about freely. He had to always have a guard.
Tell us something about Maria Sung. When she heard the news that Archbishop Malingo met with the Pope and that he had asked him to come back and essentially forsake his wife, what happened?
Well, when the Archbishop returned to Rome in August of 2001, he was accompanied by his wife as well as a representative of the Unification Church, Reverend Zachary Oliver. And also Reverend Philip Shanker somehow became involved as a public relations person, the communications director. Well, when the Archbishop arrived in Milan, the plane flew from New York to Milan, and then they were to go to Rome or to Castel Gandolfo to visit the Pope.
Right.
They were immediately separated by these Italian handlers, these women who were supposed to have had the Archbishop's vested interests at heart. And they put his wife up in a hotel, his wife and Zachary up in a hotel, told them, we'll take care of it and all that. These Italian handlers never did take care of it. Maria was stuck with the bill at the end of the stay, and they whisked the Archbishop off in a car and eventually led him to Castel Gandolfo, where he met the Pope.
Yeah.
But anyone who knows the Archbishop's wife, Maria Sung Malingo, knows that you are confronting the Spanish Armada, to put it in the mildest of terms, because she is a very strong,
the Vatican had no
powerful, determined
idea.
woman. The Vatican had no idea. And the other thing is, in Rome during the month of August, they call it Fier Agosto. Fier Agosto means it's a festive season in Rome. It's so hot in Rome during August that a lot of the shop owners close their stores and they flee to the countryside where it's cooling. That's why the Pope goes to Castel Gandolfo, because it's more comfortable there. Well, there was nothing happening in the news. And then all of a sudden, Archbishop Malingo shows up with his wife, and it becomes
an explosion.
And Maria is there at the Vatican while she's trying to find out what they've done with her husband. And she's there praying in St. Peter's Square. If anyone has ever been to Rome and seen that majestic, magnificent square there in front of St. Peter Basilica, one can be just swallowed up, engulfed, entrenched in Catholicism. The nuns and the priests roaming through, the seminarians, or the faithful going through the square to make prayers.
And the press was very attentive to her situation.
Very attentive, but it was quiet in the news. So the only news was Archbishop Malingo and his wife. So Maria has decided that she's going to fast until the Vatican officials release her husband. The Vatican is engaged in interventions between Archbishop Malingo and Reverend Shanka, who's representing the Unification Church and who was really the sponsor of the Archbishop at the time. And Maria is receiving reporters on her deathbed, almost fasting to the point.
Essentially a hunger strike.
A hunger strike to the point of almost death, determined that she would not eat a morsel or drink a drop until the Vatican allowed her to see her husband. Well, that eventually happened. And what was supposed to have only been a 5-minute encounter turned out to be a 2-hour.
And what happened as a result of that meeting?
Well, of course, the Archbishop, under a lot of duress, said to Maria that they had to not see each other as husband and wife anymore, but as brother and sister, brother-sister relationship, and that he would never forget her, but it couldn't be. Things just couldn't be the way that
they had hoped. Because the Pope intervened.
Exactly, the Pope intervened. So as I said, he spent a year in Argentina, another 4 years back in the outskirts of Italy in a place called Zagarolo, where the Archbishop had exercised his ministry of preaching the gospel, healing the sick, and casting out devils, as Jesus did, as you read in Luke chapter 9, verses 1 and 2, but heavily guarded by 2 priests, security, and 3 nuns who were to watch his every move. And what eventually happened is that the Archbishop relates it this way, that he received revelations from God and from the spirit world, that he had to be willing to put his life on the line for the salvation of the Roman Catholic Church, to purify the church, to cleanse the church of infidelity, to heal the church of some of her ways that were not of God. And he said that the voice from heaven said, others have gone before you and have given up their lives. What makes you think you're any better? You have to get up and
be willing to risk your life.
Be willing to risk your life. So he planned his escape over a 2-week period, and literally on the last day of his time there at Zagarolo, he celebrated, he exposed the Eucharist for adoration and veneration. He said Mass. He had lunch, and when it was time to take a siesta, while the nuns were washing the dishes, he escaped down the hillside, slipped out, and a car awaited him to whisk him off to the airport. And everything else is now public knowledge.
Well, he arrived last month in June of 2006 to Washington, D.C.
Yes.
Where he held a press conference with you standing at his side.
Yes.
So tell us about Married Priests Now, a new movement being organized and led by Archbishop Malingo and yourself to address the situation of the estimated 150,000 married priests who have been, in a sense, ostracized in their role as priests by the Roman Catholic Church. Tell us about Married Priests Now.
Approximately 150,000 Roman Catholic priests have married in the past 2 to 3 decades. In the United States alone, 20,000 Roman Catholic priests have married. All of that in light of the fact that there are literally thousands of parishes in the Roman Catholic Church in the United States of America that do not have a priest. They are priestless parishes.
Yeah.
Where there is no Eucharist, there is no Catholicism. And you cannot have Eucharist, you cannot have the body and blood of Jesus the Christ unless there are priests there to celebrate or to celebrate Mass and to confect the Eucharist. So the Archbishop in his wisdom has said, we have a solution to all of the priestless parishes in the United States and in Europe, around the world, that we can reinstate these married priests to active ministry, to serve these vacant priestless churches, and reach into a rich reservoir of men who have been trained, educated, experienced in pastoral ministry to serve in these churches.
Well, not only that, but I guess thinking about it, they would also bring something new to the church, which is an understanding about family life, marriage,
right,
which the average priest and bishop and cardinal aren't so, don't know so much about on a personal level.
Exactly. I always prided myself as a priest when it came to marriage counseling. I, a single man, didn't need to be married in order to advise a married couple on the do's and the don'ts. How naive I really was until I got married and had a wife and kids myself. It made it very real. I can give much better counseling and advice to couples who are preparing for marriage now because I have gone down that path. The beautiful thing about Jesus and in following Jesus is that he had already gone down the path that leads us back to God. And he was not one who came among us who did not know our sufferings, who did not know our struggles. He preceded us on that path. Therefore, he could lead us in the right way. Married priests in the Roman Church, it's the best of both worlds. It's a win-win situation. The Roman Catholic Church will have reinstated those men who spent half their lives preparing for ordained ministry and who served faithfully and with a level of professionalism that is unrivaled in any other religious institution. And yet at the same time, these men have an experience of family who can share with the church the beauty of marriage. Archbishop Malingo states it this way: it is from married families that priests, bishops, popes, and saints came. The more families we have, especially with priests, especially with married priests, the more will the church be able to produce better priests, bishops, popes, and saints.
And I guess also we can imagine nuns also being able to participate in that kind of...
Oh, yes, that goes without saying. You know, once the priests are allowed to marry, the nuns will come. And we're not married. The association, the organization of married priests now is not seeking to challenge the church's position on celibacy. We believe that if the Roman Catholic Church is willing to reconcile with married priests and to reinstate these married priests into ordained ministry, into active ordained ministry, then celibacy will become a non-issue. But it still will allow for those men who desire not to marry, who prefer to live a non-married life, a celibate life, can still do so. But we will soon discover that most men will choose marriage and will bring forth a stronger, better, and healthier church as a result of it.
Why do you think leaders of the Roman Catholic Church oppose ending mandatory celibacy and allowing priests to marry? Why do they oppose it?
I think it is opposed not based upon any biblical teachings, because the Bible does not say that only celibate men can be priests. In fact, it's just the opposite. St. Peter was married. Practically all of the apostles were married. In the beginnings of the church, bishops were married, priests were married. It wasn't until popes were married. It wasn't until 1134 that celibacy became mandatory in the Roman Church. That's the 12th century. So the Roman Catholic Church has had a married priesthood longer than a non-married priesthood, historically, if you look at the 2,000-year span. The church, I think, looks at celibacy as the lesser of two problematic areas. If the priest is allowed to marry, the church senses that somehow it has an obligation to the spouse of the priest and the children once that priest is incapacitated or dies. That's why celibacy really came in.
It's a financial obligation.
It's a financial obligation. That's why it changed in 1134, because it was an economic issue, not a spiritual issue at all. And we're paying the price for it now in the Roman Church as a result of that. History has caught up with us 900 years later. But the point is, the Roman Catholic Church is just simply it simply takes the position that we have decreed through our church tradition that men cannot marry in the Roman Church, even though there are married priests in the Roman Catholic Church functioning in institutions and parishes. Those men who were Anglican or Episcopal or Episcopalian priests, Lutheran priests, who had married prior to becoming Roman Catholic priests, they have been allowed to maintain their marriages.
So there's already that precedent.
Yes, there's a precedent already. So all we're saying is that, broaden the horizon, see the bigger picture, that we'll have more priests if we allow men to marry.
Fascinating. Now, recently there was a vote in the news that the Roman Catholic Church voted and they rejected ending mandatory celibacy. What do you think needs to happen to change the tide of opinion within the institution of the church itself?
Allow Roman Catholic priests who have married to be reconciled with the church and restored to active ministry. That will make optional celibacy a non-issue. The reality is this, Brett. The Roman Catholic Church coils, shows its fangs, shows, its nails when anyone mentions changing a centuries-old policy on celibacy. It all depends on your approach. Married priests now is not saying end celibacy. Married priests now is not saying provide for optional celibacy. What married priests now is stating very clearly and specifically is one thing: reconcile married priests to the church.
They've already given up celibacy.
They've already given it up.
That decision for them has already been made. Just let them come back into the fold in their leadership positions.
And allow them to enrich the church by their unique gifts of marriage. Allow them to bring back their years of study, of preparation, of education experience back into the ministry, and allow the laity to have a priest in their churches, in their parishes, that can enrich their spirituality.
Very clear. Some people have likened Archbishop Malingo's cause and your cause to that of the Reformation leader Martin Luther. How do you see the challenge facing both of you at this time? How do you see the challenge of making this a successful mission?
The challenge is to stay focused on the mission from God and not in any way to allow person to stand in the way of what God has called us to do. We, both Archbishop Malingo and I, must realize that our lives do not belong to us. They belong to God and to God's people. And that our calling in life is not to have an epitaph that says we did things our way, I did it my way. No, it is to say we did it God's way, even at the cost of risking or losing our lives. And as long as we stay focused on God's call and that this is God's mission for the betterment of his people, even though it may cause pain and hurt and misunderstanding on the part of the Roman Catholic Church or others, that in the end, if God's will prevails, the church will come to understand that we took a very prophetic position in a time of great uncertainty and non-support.
Very clear. What are your plans for building momentum and getting this historic cause rolling? What plans do you have for the future?
Archbishop Emmanuel Malingo will conduct a preaching tour around the United States of America over the next 6 months, up until December of 2006. And then he will return to his motherland of Zambia to launch a new ministry there, similar to what we're doing here in America, appealing to married priests in the Roman Catholic Church to come back and be reconciled and reinstated in the Catholic Church. And the Archbishop's work will be focused on his unique call from God, his charism of preaching the gospel, healing the sick, and casting out devils. So he will be conducting services of healing and deliverance across America, and at the same time appealing to these married priests to come forward and recommit themselves to the church.
So you'll be contacting them, obviously, and being in touch with those associations of married priests that share that common cause.
Definitely. That will be the defining moment for the Married Priest Now movement, that we will be able to have a cadre or corps of married priests who once served in the Roman Catholic Church, who are ready, willing, and available to come to the assistance of the church to meet the profound spiritual needs of Catholics in the United States of America.
If you could send a message to the Vatican about what you're doing, what would it be?
The message would be one of trust, one of support, and one of a waiting attitude. Let's trust God, that God moves in mysterious ways.
Have some patience.
Have some patience. Let's wait and see if there will arise a cry, a massive cry from the grassroots that says married priests now will be good for the church, and confidence that God doesn't always work through ways that men and women have arranged, that sometimes God will work in extraordinary ways, in extraordinary circumstances, to bring about a healing for his church.
Archbishop Stallings, it's been a real pleasure to have you here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For your leadership and for sharing your vision with us today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. God bless you.
Bless you too.
You've been watching The Defining Moment for Creating the Culture of Conscience. You can find us on the internet at www.definingmoment.tv. Thanks for watching and have a great day.